That's good. That
That's
sounds
good.
good.
And with that, everyone that's tuning in, welcome, welcome. This is Wild the podcast, where we dive into what we love doing, and that is having inspiring, life changing conversations live on air. I'm Diana Kouprina, and this evening we're joined by Kendy Boardman, consultant, life coach, and 911 first respondent dispatcher. Kendy, thank you for being here this evening.
Thank you for having me. I'm
It's my pleasure.
excited to be
Well,
here.
I'm really excited for our show. And while the podcast airs live on Jess TV, 24/7 Roku TV, 101 TV, NCG Television Network, Meta TV, and of course, you can always tune in online at www.jessfm.ca. While the podcast is proudly sponsored by W.I.L.D, the nonprofit, with a mission of eradicating domestic violence through storytelling, connection, and by providing opportunities for everyone to be heard for free as part of our vision for a better tomorrow. For more information, please visit wildthenonprofit.com. Sponsored by Wild Homes and Gardens magazine and Borderline, a poetic memoir published by Wild Press and available on Amazon CA. Each copy sold helps us further our cause for sharing inspiring stories for free. If you wish to be a guest on Wild the Podcast, please email us at hello@wildthepodcast.com. And everyone, thank you for tuning in. Kendy, I'm so excited. Let's just dive in. What got you started with being a first respondent dispatcher for
Ah,
911?
okay. Well, let's see. I got started with being a dispatcher when I was actually working at a print shop, printing T-shirts and doing embroidery. But I've always had a hot passion for helping women, especially, but for
Mm-hmm.
helping other people. And so when um, I saw an ad for 911 dispatcher, and um, I decided to apply and see if I would get it. And it was a grueling process to go through. It took several months, polygraph
Wow.
tests and psych
Mm-hmm.
evaluations and the whole gamut. But yeah, I was accepted and started work a couple months after going through all the
How long have
process.
you
So
been? How long have you been doing it?
I'm actually not doing it now. Right now,
Okay.
I'm full time working on
Good.
consulting and
Yeah.
copywriting, and but I did it for a little over a year,
Mm-hmm.
and then I decided to that I needed to go in a different direction and follow my passion and my heart, and um,
I
get
absolutely
back
love
into
that
get
because it
back
is
into helping
what I
women.
love doing. Wild does stand for what I love doing. So,
Right.
um, was there any triggers that made you kind of have that switch, find that calling, find that purpose?
Um, let's see. I've been a life coach for since about 2012. I realized that I had a passion for working with women in particular
Mm-hmm.
in around 2009, I think somewhere around in that area. I was volunteering for a women's domestic violence shelter
Mm-hmm.
and helping with their group mediation, doing that, and found that a couple of things actually during that. I found discovered that what I was going through in my personal life was actually abuse, and was emotional and mental abuse. And then I also found that I had a deep passion for helping women.
Mm-hmm.
So I then decided to um, a few years later, I started a degree in psychology with the intent of becoming a psychologist. But it's veered several times since then. But yeah, now I'm consulting and life coaching.
Did you find it? How hard was it for you to leave? I ask because for me personally, it was very hard. I couldn't do it. I died and I was still in it, and I could not leave. Um, And really, it wasn't that I even left. It was just I was lucky that he discarded me, basically, like trash. That
Mhm.
it worked out in that sense, and it sent me back to my parents' house, and it sent me back into this whole healing, self-reclaiming, crazy 15, 16 years. But I'm really grateful for that. But at the same time, I even though I knew it was bad, even though I knew it was a really unhealthy codependent relationship, even though I knew I was an addict, it was almost like I was addicted to the relationship itself as well.
Mhm. Right. I've actually been through 2 failed marriages and 2 divorces, and that were not that were ugly divorces, but it's always hard. But um and especially when kids are involved. I have 3 sons, so there was that aspect as well, which was very hard. And I didn't leave my second husband until I my youngest son was grown and out of the house, and it was still hard. It was an ugly mess. It was traumatic. It was,
Mhm.
in fact, I the emotional abuse part of it got so bad that my parents had to. I had an emotional breakdown, and my
Mhm.
parents actually came and got me and took me home, and so I could rest and recover and get back
Yeah.
to recovery of myself. And yeah, it was tough.
So, in your view, what does healing really look like, and how is it different from what most people expect, or how does it even differ?
I think people expect healing to be linear.
Mm-hmm.
They expect, the trauma happens here, and then, you do the steps, and boom, 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 and ta-da, you're healed. And it's anything but linear. Um,
Oh
I
yeah, I
know
feel
a
that.
lot.
I
Yeah, right. Yeah, I know a lot of, I've seen a lot of things in working with domestic violence survivors. They've got the pretty circles, with the
Mhm.
cycles that you go through. And that is true. That is true. But in my experience, it's messier than that. That wraps it up in a neat little circle, but it's more like a scribble. It's more like, you've
Yeah.
got the trauma here, and you start working on yourself and trying to get better,
Mhm.
and you're doing things and thinking things are going okay, and then you wake up one morning and bam, you're over here, and
Mhm.
you're going, what even happened? How did I even get here? And then you start again, and you start working, and you start doing what you need to do, working on you, healing, the whole process again, and then something triggers you, and you're way down here. And it's
Yeah.
just a process over and over, and it's definitely not linear. It's bouncing all over the place. And then hopefully, as you start to heal and you start to put in the work, it starts to be more of an upward progress rather than bouncing, and your bounces are further or not as far. They're, shorter
Yeah. Yeah.
distances. And then
But
you're
I feel
starting to
everything
heal.
you
But
said. Like I
yeah.
honestly deeply down because I think I also fought with myself very hard because I was like, why isn't this just going in this linear process? Why am I continuously falling back into this? If
Yeah.
something goes wrong, if something feels unsteady, I'm back at square one. And it's almost like I didn't do all these progressions. So I'm thrown back into it and I start over and then it goes back and I started over. And I mean,
Yes.
for me, honestly, that part of my life that I held on so tight. I couldn't, when I was living my life, I was still living in the past. I wasn't
Hmm.
feeling any of the present because everything was replaying in my mind. And I'm very visual, so that doesn't help. So it's like this movie that's playing on repeat of everything that went wrong. And then I went into this huge denial. And it was like, well, maybe it wasn't like, maybe it wasn't abuse. Maybe he really did love me. And I went on
Mm.
I had a little psychotic break. And for me personally, that psychotic break happened even after I had my daughter. I had my last psychotic break where I was just like, maybe I just need to take, we would just make life so much easier if I just took the baby and we just went back and it's perfect time. He's, left that the woman he left me for. It's perfect. Like this could
Mhm.
really work, and this my crazy psychosis and everyone around me was seeing it and they didn't know what to do. My sisters, I didn't know what to do. I called your therapist. I just didn't know because they're like, are you're in complete denial. And the thing is, he wasn't even responding to me. It was me just building this visual and just
Right.
this crazy kind of manifestation healing. And what I learned after that was that that whole time, yes, I was healing actually, and I was going through this spiritual awakening. What I didn't give power to was actually myself. I even in that moment took the power from me and gave it to him. that
Mhm.
that power, that healing, that almost like I couldn't give that. I still had him on some sort of pedestal.
Right, and that happens for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's I think a lot of times we, rather than healing is hard, it hurts,
Hmm.
it's painful, and rather than doing that, we'd rather slap a Band-Aid on it and
Oh
make it all
yeah.
pretty, cover it
Yeah.
up, pretend it's not there, but the problem with that is it is there, and beneath the Band-Aid, it's festering, and it's
Hmm.
not going away, it's getting worse, and it's ugly, it's messy, and eventually the Band-Aid's going to fall off or get ripped off, and you're gonna have that festering mess
Yes.
where you're gonna have to deal with it.
And the more it festers, the more it grows, the bigger and bigger it gets, and the harder
Yes.
and harder it is to really get back through that reclaiming. For me, yeah, what really nailed my personal healing down was sitting down and saying, I want to write this book. And my battle with it again was linear thinking. I was like, I need to tell my
Mhm.
story in a linear way. Like I immigrated to the US, I did this, then this happened, then I tried to escape my parents, I sent myself, then this happened, my initial trauma at 12. So this is explained, and this really linear. And then the more I wrote, I realized it's not really just even linear because all of it is so multifaceted and dimensional and has these other existences. But I don't know if I have any other words for that.
No, I totally understand that. In fact, it's when I started trying to write out
Hmm.
to heal, it's hard to know where to start sometimes even, and it's scary it can be scary because you don't wanna put yourself back in it. You don't wanna experience that pain again. You want, you're it's almost afraid to tell your story
Hmm.
because you're exposing yourself. You're exposing vulnerable, raw parts of yourself that you'd rather hide, keep hidden under the band aid, right? And instead, you've got to figure out how to face it for yourself, for one thing, and how to write it down and then maybe share it with others. And that was one of the hard things I had a problem with was even just journaling for myself, knowing no one is ever
Hmm.
going to read it, but it's just knowing where to start, how to do it, and where to go, and not linear thinking, like you said.
Hmm.
Um, Sometimes you're just not into where the next step is because you're
Yeah.
trying to deal with something else over here,
You're
but
still
that's not the
dealing with
next
so much,
step.
or
And
the
yes,
aftermath of that whole, like, I didn't even have an ending. I was like, what do I write? Hi, I'm still stateless. Like, that's not a
yeah,
happy ending.
right.
How is that even inspiring? I'm still helpless. I'm sorry, but I think I made it far. So I really, really struggled with that one, but somehow it just worked. And for what worked for me was also having Ashton. And unfortunately, she's not here. She's my co-host. She's my editor. She is the publisher. She's really a big part of the everything we do. And her home recently burned down. So
Oh
it's hard
yeah.
not having her, but I do hope you can come back and do it again with the two of us and get kind of the feel for.
Oh, yeah, I
having
love that.
you know a different having two people, have a more of an interesting conversation. But now I just trailed my thought. I don't know where I was going with that. I'm sorry. I got excited
That's
about
okay.
something and then I just poof. Yes, we do miss Ashton. She really did help me kind of break away from that linear, especially with her editorial remarks. Because I really did. At first, I sat down. I was like, I don't know. We're going to start with the day I arrived, the day I was born, or the first time I had a grand mal seizure, or the first traumatic event, and kind of like try to piece it together because I realized there's just so much from my mental health that at certain so many points in my life was never even addressed. And then I'm just kind
Mhm.
of
Yeah.
once I really realized, okay, my healing is about reclaiming myself. That's when I learned that okay, in those aspects, I have to address my mental health, and that I've seen the difference in what it was and what I struggled with, the grandma seizures and all of that, and it was never addressed. And then after recently, actually, finally, I was like, I just want a diagnosis. And finally, I was diagnosed with um, AUDHD, so autism and ADHD is the final label for
Mhm.
all the craziness under that umbrella I went through. And borderline personality disorder was one of them.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Wow.
I went through a whole cycle,
Oh, yeah, it sounds like it. I
and it was
know,
that fear of abandonment that
mhm.
really, like, it felt like I'd rather die than be abandoned, like, to that extent, that desperation.
Mm. Yeah, that's really hard. No, that feeling of being abandoned, like you said, of being alone and
Hmm.
having to face the world alone, that's, through, a lot of the trauma in my life, and I've had trauma from childhood on,
Hmm.
um, all over in my life, and like I said, I've been very good at covering it up. I've layered on the Band-Aids, and they were all
Yeah.
pretty, with smiley faces and, making them as pretty as possible, but the problem was, it caught up with me, and at one point, I'm I'm married now to a
Hmm.
wonderful man, and we have a wonderful marriage, and we before we moved back to my hometown, we were living in Washington, and he had, um a job where he was gone a lot, and we had no real friends there.
Hmm.
So I was at home alone, and I had a heart episode, a
Oh
cardiac
wow.
episode or something,
Oh.
is what they, and was taken via ambulance to the emergency room. And that led to a spiral of anxiety and panic attacks every time I
Hmm.
was alone. I couldn't stand to be alone. The anxiety, the panic, and finally was diagnosed with anxiety and panic disorder
Hmm.
because it got so bad. I couldn't be alone at all. We had to have my youngest grown son come from another state and stay with us because I couldn't be left alone.
You couldn't be
It
alone.
would it would spiral into anxiety and panic,
Hmm.
and to the point where I couldn't even shower without my husband being sitting right outside the shower with the shower curtain halfway open is the only way I could even stand to shower.
Yeah.
And so after months of going through this and being on antipsychotic
Hmm.
medications, my son was going to have to leave because he had a wife and a life
Yeah. Yeah.
and work, and
Yeah.
so we decided to move back to where I'm from, where my parents
Hmm.
were, and most of my family is, and so that we could have support and I wouldn't have to be alone. And then within 3 weeks of moving back, we both got COVID. It was in 2020,
Oh, I'm
2021.
sorry.
And we were
Oh.
living out of town in a cabin, and he collapsed, and I had to have the ambulance come out, and they took him to the hospital.
Hmm.
And I was quarantined out of town, completely isolated, alone with my panic and anxiety.
Yeah.
And I was that way for 10 days.
Oh wow.
And
That's
that
hard.
is
That
that's
is
when
that
my
is hard.
healing actually happened.
Oh.
Yeah. right? Yeah, which is
Oh,
shocking and
because I'm
surprising.
thinking, you got me thinking to the moments with my ex-husband where I was like in college, I had a single, and then he had his dorm, and he ended up going to rehab, and there was this stretch of time where I had to go through going to classes, and I could not be in that single by myself. Like I literally could
Mhm.
not leave, and then I couldn't go, and I just literally had to beg a friend to let me crash on her couch just so I wouldn't be alone.
Oh, yeah.
And I know, that's why I was like, oh, 10 days. That's painful.
It it was
Right?
it was painful, it was, and if I had had a choice, I definitely would not have stayed there alone, but because of COVID and
Mhm.
quarantine, I didn't have a choice. I had to be there alone, so I had to face everything, and the Band-Aids were ripped off, just
Yeah.
and I was left with the mess, and I ac there are I found that through this, that there are 2 critical things for healing. One of them
Hmm.
is truth. One of them is being able to face the truth of who you
Yes.
are and what you
Oh,
believe,
yes.
the truth of what happened to you,
Hmm.
the truth that it wasn't your fault,
Yeah.
and the truth that you have strength inside
Hmm.
you. And another truth that I had to face was that I'm never alone because my God is always with me.
Hmm.
I'm surrounded by a network of family, so I'm never truly alone.
Right.
So that started the healing process, and then I coupled that with grace to allow
Hmm.
myself to feel the things that I needed to feel without feeling like I was bad. Like
Hmm.
the guilt,
The guilt.
the
Yeah.
yeah, the
The
guilt,
guilt, the
the
shame, the
shame.
guilt, the over and over, that it's literally
Yes.
somehow, somewhere your fault. So for me, even when I
Mhm.
was raped at 12, I still blame myself because I was the one who left my house without
Mhm.
telling the truth to my parents where I was going, who obviously wouldn't have let me go anywhere. But I lied.
Right.
I left my house. I met this stranger on, it was AOL back then. It was those chat groups. I met this
Oh, uh-huh.
stranger, and he said he was 17. I was really 12. I was like, maybe
Mm.
we can be friends. I saw his picture. It wasn't like I was attracted, but I was like, maybe I can be friends. I need a friend. I was very lonely at that time. And he invited me out to go see Titanic, and he was being already handsy. And I still,
Mm.
even then, I did not leave. And I actually followed him. He was like, "Hey, why don't you come back to my house?" And I actually followed him back to his house because at the time I was 12, feeling completely alone. This boy I really liked just broke my heart, and I was just completely going through this crisis mode in my brain, and my parents don't understand me. My brother and sister were just born. We're 12 years apart, so it was so much was happening, and I followed him, and he offered
Mm.
me a drink, and I took a sip, and it was roofied, and after that I
Oh.
just have some really horrible memories. And he even invited his friend, and then they kind of, I don't know who else came, but somehow they put me in the car and then just kind of dropped me off at home like I was trash.
Mm.
Look, I was 12.
Oh,
My
man.
mom, a Soviet woman, did not, take it well
I
either.
bet.
That freaked her out. She threw me in a cold shower. We never even talked about it. It was just kind of like, this never happened. That kind
Mhm.
of huge thing that never happened. And I just lived
Yeah.
with the shame and guilt that if I just hadn't done these steps, or if I had just ran before, why didn't I just get off at the train? I could have, there were so many options that could have happened, and I didn't choose any of them.
No, and that's where the guilt and the shame
Yeah.
and the blame comes in, and that's where the deep grace that we have to
Hmm.
give ourselves before we can heal comes in, because the truth is that you were 12 years old. None of it was
Yeah. Now I see
you
it.
were
My
thinking like
daughter's
a
10
12,
right
yeah,
now. I'm like,
exactly.
she has 12-year-old friends, and I'm going, how? I don't, it doesn't make sense to me, right?
Right.
The child is 12. It's still a child. I'm
Uh-huh.
sorry.
Right.
My daughter's best friend is 12 years old. Look at her, and she doesn't look any older and wiser than my 10-year-old.
Mhm. Yeah.
Some people could say my 10-year-old could look like she's 12 because she's tall and she's already kind of reaching that prepubescent stage. So you can say maybe she's 12. And looking at
Mhm.
her, I'm like, what? It just back.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, I know when you look back and you think, "Oh my gosh, that's when I did
I
that."
was a
That's
baby. I was a
uh-huh.
baby.
Definitely.
So there's a lot of, yeah, grace and just letting go, and everything you've said, I felt and obviously gone through.
Yeah.
I just never really even had the language because I didn't ever really have proper therapy, and I never trusted therapists because one time I was sent to a mental hospital. It was a really bad experience. So
Mm.
after that, I always found I was lying to my shrinks to really just get my way. And that's
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's hard for therapy to work when when you're,
right.
yeah,
If I'm
in
controlling
situations
the
like
narrative
that.
and I know what I'm telling you and what I'm not telling you, then
Right. Yeah.
But I did ultimately learn authenticity with yourself is so important too. Just that trust and being honest
Mhm.
with the self is so, so valuable and so important. And like you said, it's
It
just,
is.
but it's hard to get there. I think
It is,
it is
and
hard to
that's
get
another part of the grace is trying to give yourself grace to be who you are and to feel the way you feel and to be okay with that and to learn to like yourself because of allowing yourself the grace and looking at
there.
yourself through the eyes of grace and how you would look at someone else with
Yeah. Hmm.
compassion.
Hmm.
Well, you've got to turn that inwards and focus that on yourself, and that's the that's the part of deep grace right there.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's there's a lot of healing in that.
Yeah. And since we need this little moment, we have about, I want to say, 15 minutes left to go. I
Oh
want to
wow.
reintroduce the show really quickly, but before I do that, I also want to mention you have a few surprises, few gifts for our listeners that have been listening thus far on Wild the podcast. And we will take those 15 minutes to introduce everything right here, right after I reintroduce the show. Anyone who's listening, thank you for tuning in. We really appreciate it. While the podcast has been reaching around 60,000 viewers per live episode, we're so grateful you're tuning in, commenting, and joining us on air in live discussions. Again, this is Wild the podcast where we dive into what we love doing, and that is having inspiring, life-changing conversations live on air. I'm Diana Kouprina, and this evening we're joined with Kendy Boardman, consultant, life coach, and 911 first respondent dispatcher. While the podcast airs live on Just TV, 24/7 Roku TV, 101 TV, NCG Television Network, Meta TV, and of course, www.justfm.ca. While the podcast is proudly sponsored by W.I.L.D, the nonprofit, with the mission of eradicating domestic violence through storytelling, connection, and by providing opportunities for everyone to be heard for free as part of our vision for a better tomorrow. For more information, please visit wildthenonprofit.com. Sponsored by Wild Homes and Gardens Magazine and Borderline, a poetic memoir published by Wild Press, written by me, Diana Kouprina, and available on Amazon.ca. Each copy sold helps us further our cause of sharing inspiring stories for free. If you wish to be a guest on Wild the Podcast, please email us at hello@wildthepodcast.com. Thank you for listening. And I'm right back with you, Kendy. So let's talk about
Okay.
a few things you have planned, and the gift you have available for the podcast listeners.
Okay. First thing I'm really excited about is I'm developing a 12-week program called Deep Grace, which incorporates everything that we've kind of been talking about with facing the truth and coupling that with grace in order to heal. It's in the works right now,
Mhm.
and I'm expecting it to roll out with a beta group at the beginning of fall. That being said, I do have a wait list right now for anyone who's interested in the deep grace method for trying to heal themselves
Yeah.
and um, rip those band-aids off and finally
Oh,
deal
absolutely.
with everything before they get ripped off and you're forced to. Join our wait list for the people who are watching today or tonight. Um, there's a founders group that I'm going to be starting with this beta group that you will get 50% off
Hmm.
and early bonuses and a first look at the journey.
Oh, that's
So,
amazing.
yeah, I'm
It
really
sounds
excited
amazing.
about it.
It sounds really great just because we were already naturally even just speaking about it. And honestly, I will say that in my healing, and it's been very independent, like I said, because my trust issues with therapy and kind of manipulating my therapist never really got me far. But through it all, eventually I did try out life coaching, and there was a
Hmm.
school that I got my certificate. But what I didn't pursue life coaching, but it helped me kind of reawaken that spiritual side of me that I really needed to come back to life and take
Right,
control, because that is my creativity. And I feel for so long it was just dead. It wasn't coming to life. I refused to even pick up a pen and journal. My doctor would say, just write about the events. I wouldn't do it, because again, I would completely go back and my life is linear. And I'm like, am
right.
I really going to have to sit down and write it all this is not, I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
This can't happen.
Which is perfect because that leads me into the free gift I have for your listeners for today, which is called the Story Safe script, which
Hmm.
is a 5-step um, booklet that actually takes you through how to learn how to write out your experiences and how to do that without re-experiencing the trauma or without spiraling into deep pain or oversharing with things that you're not
Hmm.
ready to share yet, how to draw boundaries and how to script it out with it has prompts for how
Okay,
to
that is
start.
really amazing. I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second. I
Yeah.
really wish I had that before I started writing my book, because everything you just mentioned, I went through with writing my book. I mean, each chapter
Yes.
I felt I went back, and like I went into the dorsal vocal stage. I was shaking. I was freezing after. My brain
Mm-hmm.
is like, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, and
Yeah.
sometimes I wonder, like, am I over? And I think I overstepped a lot of boundaries because I just completely unleashed. It wasn't just, it was just like a floodgate that just went, and it wasn't kind of controlled, and it was really hard. And after writing the book, I did crash. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
recovering from that crash, and just being and embracing and actually feeling the fact that, wow, like I dreamt of writing a book, I did it, I should be excited, not being like, oh my god, this was so scary. What just
Yeah.
happened to
Right.
me?
It is scary
I can't come
and
out for a little bit, like I can't
and
like,
having
no.
something where you've got a safer method to do it, an emotionally
Hmm.
safe method to do
Yeah.
it is important. And that's like I told you before, trying to journal my experiences to heal through therapy, and I could never do it. And so
Hmm.
I developed this to help others be able to overcome that and not freeze or not panic or not spiral and not relive the trauma, to be safe in it and be able to express themselves and re-find their voice, because a lot of times our voice has just been gone for so many years that we
Oh,
don't
yeah.
even know how our voice sounds, who we are
Oh,
in our
absolutely.
voice.
I went through that. I'm still going through that kind of transformation, especially when I do the podcast and when I start talking. That's when I'm like, oh, is that my voice? Or what is it really? Because so for so long, I tried to mask it and make it sound different and try
Mhm.
to be accepted. And I think a lot of it also had obviously because I was an immigrant, so I never wanted to be a fresh off the boat with an accent. And I really polished so many layers of how different I sound. And I realize even sometimes when I'm reading now, I have various accents come out. Sometimes I do a British accent when I'm reading, and I don't mean to, but that is the way my father actually taught me English because he studied in England before going to Yale University. And he was really
Oh.
big. You shouldn't have an accent. Like there should you have to speak proper English. And it stuck. And then I remember I wanted to fit in with kids and I didn't want to have a British accent. So I completely switched all of that and turned it. At one point, I had a Boston accent. I will it completely like I was saying Boston, I was saying park the car, I was forgetting my
I can
R's,
hear
like
that.
God. So now when I do this, I'm like, okay, I'm feeling vibrations, I'm feeling this. But like with anything, I kind of go full on, full throttle, no boundaries. And then I'm like, maybe should have been good if I was, if I had some a little bit more boundaries or if I gave myself more space or understanding, like you said, with what you have
Mhm.
offering. Actually, I will be downloading it after we finish
Yeah,
talking
definitely.
because I think I
Yeah,
need
please do.
it. I'm feeling that.
Well, that's awesome.
We have just a few minutes before we get to say goodnight, but I want you to kind of reintroduce and give yourself a quick promo where our listeners can find out more about you, get to know you better, and your services, and everything else that you have to offer.
Okay. Like I said, I'm a copywriter and for women's wellness, and I also do consulting and life coaching. And my website is kendyboardman.com.
Mhm.
And you can find out about me there. I'm immersed in developing the Deep Grace program, and I'm going to have a part of that is going to be a blog on my website. It's not up quite yet,
Oh,
but it
that's
will be soon.
amazing.
And
I'll
it's
be I'll be checking in on
yeah.
everything.
Surprisingly, it's going to be called Deep Grace as well. So, yeah,
I love
um,
that. I
I do
really feel that.
one-on-one consulting, group consulting, and then the 12-week program is going to be a group program as well. So,
That's
very
amazing.
exciting.
I look forward to, diving into the gift you have available for the listeners. I'm really excited
Oh,
about
great.
that. And with that, we get to say goodnight for the evening. Candy,
All
Mm.
thank you
right.
so much
Well,
for being here on Wild the
thank you
podcast.
for having me. I really enjoyed it.
And for our listeners, thank you for tuning in. And please, please, please love each other, love yourselves most, and then take care of each other. Until then, until next time, have a great night. Thank you so much, Candy.
You're welcome. Good night.